Alan, just back to the theme slide for a moment. Okay. What do you reckon it is? Have you got a thought, Max?
Poetic license.
Yep.
So you've got Moses, so he represents the law, and it's Jesus' model.
So Moses is there representing the law, and
Jesus is allowed to hold the scroll.
Yep.
Because of poetic license.
And what's Elijah holding? Oh no, that's Moses on this side. That's Elijah. I thought Elijah could have been holding a book of the prophets. Yep. Very true. Yeah, very good. Actually, I did think we read into photos what we our own perceptions, don't we? Because I did think at one stage after Max asked the question, obviously that's Jesus' strategic plan. He's written it down to share it with the disciples at the training weekend up on. That's not what's happening though, is it? But sometimes we wish God would speak to us and make it as clear as that, to tell us exactly what's going on. So the disciples are struggling with what Jesus said in the chapter before. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus tells the disciples that he's going to be crucified and died, and that God would raise him. The disciples don't want to hear this, and it's after that Jesus takes these disciples up a mountain. Now, big question, trick question. You can get a pancake afterwards if you get this one right. How many disciples went up a mountain? 3. Peter, James and John. Now, why did Jesus only take 3? Was it because the path was so narrow? Someone whispered it. Very good, Jan. Good to have you with us this morning. They were close to him. And that's one of the things that I've been reflecting on the reading this week. Jesus chose those 3 who were closest to him to go up the mountain with him. Now, was that because that wasn't because they were the ones who were held, it wasn't a hierarchy thing, was it? These are the ones that Jesus shared more intimately a number of things with them. Because the whole 12 was a mixed bag, and he found that there were some things he wanted to share with a smaller group. Now that's like us, isn't it? There are some things we might share with one other person that we wouldn't share with a whole group of people. That's natural for us. Although I did read of someone who was talking about their daughter who expressed that they never had a thought that they hadn't shared with everyone. So maybe some people are more willing to share with everyone whatever it is they're thinking. But that's not always normally we like to keep some things a little bit quieter, particularly if it's something we're not sure about, or we're a bit afraid of, or we're really struggling with something that's happened. We're more likely to talk about that with someone close. At one stage, we did an exercise in a congregation with the group of elders talking about spiritual friends. And the concept of spiritual friends was that you actually got together with 2 other people and you shared something more deeply. And then you listened to each other share something more deeply. And the exercise was try and encourage people to realise that it actually is helpful for us to share something with others. Now, naturally, there are things that we share with our friends, those that we feel comfortable with. But there are some things that maybe we don't share because we really struggle with a bit and not sure and don't want to be seen to not know the answer about something. So thank you for all those who spoke up today and gave an answer. And we live in hope that more people will have more courage next time. Because I can remember in school, I always used to wait until someone had, pointed the class in the right direction when you're answering questions. I didn't like to be the first one because you might have got it totally wrong, and it didn't like to be totally wrong. It was better to wait until someone sort of moved in the right direction so that you felt more confident. But the whole point of close friends is to share things we're not sure about. So Jesus takes these 3 disciples up so that he can share with them, and they can see something of a sign of what is happening and what God is doing in Jesus. And it reminds us that the value of sharing with others, our joys, our hopes, our fears and concerns. And as a congregation, there should be at least someone at times that we are sharing more deeply with. Because if we're always talking about the weather, then we're not sharing some of the storms and some of our feelings in the midst of the storms of our lives. We miss the opportunity that comes through sharing and through sharing experiences and things that we have found along the way and the support of someone else in the midst of the journey. The symbolism of the Transfiguration reminds us that God is there shining through Jesus, shining out of Jesus. And the law and the prophets are part of the story. The picture is one that shows an artist's view of what they think is happening. So hence the thing in Jesus' hands, which be interesting to know what the artist thought was in Jesus' hand, why they put that particular thing in. And you've got 2 disciples there awake and one asleep. And yet in the reading we learned they all were overcome with fear when they saw what was happening and God spoke to them. Peter's response about building, what did he say he was going to build? Do you remember? Tents. Why tents? Yep. Is there any thought of a tent somewhere in the Bible that might be significant and have a theological impact? Guy knows? Yep, so they can sleep in it. Yep, so there's a practical sense. But there's another tent that the Ark of the Covenant was in the tabernacle, which was a tent in the Exodus story, wasn't it? They took around with them. Well, some people will use a pretense to make light of, won't they? Yes, very good, Alan. It's good to know that people are awake. Yes. Another translation says monuments. I had a look at a couple of different readings around this, and one said, the New Century Version says tents. The NIV, who's an NIV reader? Yep. A booth. Polling booth. Anyway, the NIV version that I looked at said 3 shelters. What do you think, all that imagery, so there's some theological image there, but what's the idea of the shelters or the booths or the to capture the experience and to stay in the experience. Yep. So a canopy at a wedding recognise that this is a sacred spot where we're meeting God. So there's that imagery as well. Yeah. So there's a whole lot of different imagery that we can pick up in there. But it does remind me that sometimes when we have an experience, we really want it to continue the way it was. And sometimes God's calling us in the journey down the hill to actually learn some other things. And sometimes when we get back down into the spot we started from, we find that we've changed, the situation has changed, and we need to listen to what God's revealing to us down there. It's interesting, the Message translation of this passage, when it talks about the light, says his appearance changed from the inside out, right before their eyes. Sunlight poured from his face. His clothes were filled with light. His appearance changed from inside out. The light of God was coming out of the heart. All sorts of imagery there, but the Message talks about building 3 memorials on there, which is another emphasis. When have you had a sacred encounter, a time, wherever it was, with God? And what has that meant to you? And is that something you keep going back to continue to draw new insights from as you journey along and as life changes, as you change? Sometimes we learn new things from those encounters. I wanted to share with you something from C.S. Lewis. And Mac was having a look at this before. It's from The Silver Chair. Who's read The Silver Chair? Who's read The Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe? I mean, I'm old enough that I can remember we used to do that in Sunday school. We all got a copy of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and we read it. It was part of the curriculum. Yes, Olga?
I went to Sunday school.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you did. That might even be why you're here today. Now, in The Silver Chair, the heroine is called Jill. Now, there's a significant name. Jill comes... Now, who's the God symbol in Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe? The lion. So Jill, at the beginning of The Silver Chair, encounters Aslan, and Aslan tells her that she's going to enter a sacred journey, and there was about 4 signs that she had to look out for, and she was on a task that Aslan had given her. And then this is what Aslan says to her. Before you leave on this journey, this is a summary of what he's saying, you must remember the signs. Say them to yourself when you wake in the morning and when you lie down at night and when you wake in the middle of the night. What are the signs that you repeat to yourself? What's the things that you go back to and are the things, the guiding principles for yourself, maybe from an encounter with God? Repeat them and wake in the middle of the night. And whatever strange things may happen to you, let nothing turn your mind from following the signs. And this is the next part, the part that I thought was interesting. And secondly, I'll give you a warning. Here on the mountain, I've spoken to you clearly. I will not often go down in Narnia. Here on the mountain, the air is clear and your mind is clear. As you drop down into Narnia, the air will thicken. Take care that it does not confuse your mind. And the signs with which you've learned here will not look at all as you expected them to look when you meet them there. That is why it's important to know them by heart and pay attention to appearances. Remember the signs and believe the signs. Nothing else matters. And now, daughter of Eve, farewell. I thought, how true is that from when we have that moment of clarity and insight? We get back into the everyday world and all of a sudden it's easy for the air to become clouded. And today I want to encourage us in a time where maybe things pre-COVID seemed a lot easier and a lot more going the way we expected, and a time when in a whole lot of ways things are very unclear. We need to remember the signs and the things that God is saying to us And maybe the transfiguration, the sacred encounters that we need at the moment to help us, to transform us, to recognise and to be bearers of that light that shined in the face of Jesus. May we be aware of all that God is saying to us, and may we continue the journey he's leading us on.